Before that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about bridge care, just so you know who I am and why I'm here talking about this, and then get into some of the details about how we are engaging across the country with states and local communities around collecting supply and demand data, particularly on the provider supply side, and some of the tools we have and ways we think about doing that. And then, like I said, we'll get into the discussion about that whole ECE system and how we can engage across departments and funding streams. Oh, and I would just like to say before we dive in, I'm happy to have this be interactive. So if you have questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. Or like Sharon said, you have control over your own mic and video, so feel free to also just to pipe in, ask a question. We'll also have time at the end, but I'm happy to take them along the way. And if someone from Opportunities Exchange, maybe Sharon, could monitor the chat. I see we already have something, maybe it's just okay, it's just you. But if someone can monitor the chat so that if there is a question that comes in, we can take it that way. So Bridge Care is serving families, providers, and those who support families and providers, that being state administrators, CCR&Rs, local organizations, county level, human services, kind of all of the above in 250 counties, over 250 counties in 8 states. We have solutions for families, providers, and those kind of administrator, coaching level folks, and they're all white labeled to really be driven by that local organization. So here's a couple examples of what that looks like across the country. And at Bridge Care, we are a one-stop shop platform, which means that we can kind of be your all-in-one end-to-end solution for your organization's needs around childcare, early learning, and even out-of-school programs. Really all those needs around care and learning for parents. And we believe that a consolidated experience that streamlines the user experience and data collection has better results both for the folks we all seek to serve, parents and providers, as well as it more effectively captures that data, and we're able to do that in real time. And also all for the benefit of better data-driven decisions for greater impact and for reporting purposes, kind of being able to point to all the great work that is being done and have the evidence behind it. So what that looks like is we have modules that are listed on the right, and the point of the webinar today is not to go into each of those. So I just put it up here to show that streamlining is part of how we think about engaging with providers and families in a streamlined way. If you have questions about any of those other modules that I'm not going to cover today, feel free to, I'll have my information at the end and you can reach out, but we have everything from licensing to CCR&R to QRAS, to the supply and demand collection and all the data analytics. So to dive into how at Bridge Care we think about collecting ECE provider availability, I think we can break it into really 3 main categories. Since typically there's we've never encountered anyone who's willing to have kind of a like requirement for licensing around reporting availability. So we really, as a industry and as an ecosystem, have to be creative, I think, about how we get providers to engage and how we collect this information, because it is really critical for at all levels of the system to know where there are needs and how to, whether it's allocate resources, whether it's direct service and support to providers, it's all important. So we break it out into 3 main categories: direct incentives, value adding, and then reducing friction. So direct incentives is fairly straightforward. Some are doing this, but not all that we work with. So for example, connecting reporting of data, and particularly around supply, to subsidy compensation or QRAS compensation. So if you are, for example, a QRAS rated center, and maybe they're connected to, because that then impacts your subsidy compensation amount, it may be a requirement then that you report availability, or there's some kind of additional like added incentive for reporting your availability every so often. So we are seeing, we have seen some of that, and we're seeing more and more, particularly as there are stimulus dollars for extra funding for providers. Some of that is being tied to this reporting of data. And then also conditions of grants and resource support. So for example, in the pandemic, we saw some states saying we'll provide like PPE support for all providers who are updating their availability, for example. So again, incentives in place added above and beyond the minimum of just licensing. That is really not in our control. So that's where we just kind of collaborate with state administrators and local organizations to think creatively about how to create incentives. And then we provide the data so that they can make sure that they are then properly compensating along those lines. But I think where we come in, Bridge Care, is really on the next couple fronts. So adding value, I think, is really what we want to be doing. We want to be making providers believe in the value of engaging us instead of just asking them to do something extra in their life and in their busy day to day. We're adding value for why they want to be doing that. And so we provide provider SEO optimized websites. About 50% in our experience working providers, about 50% of them don't have their own website, and somewhere around 30% don't have any internet presence at all, not even like a Facebook page. And it's just a lot for providers to have to manage a whole, marketing capacity. It's typically not in their wheelhouse, and they're too busy for it, and they don't really need it until all of a sudden there's an opening. So in the communities where Bridge Care is present, they can really just leverage this community resource, this infrastructure support to like go all in on that community and have that be their presence, where they can put photos, they can put videos, they can put staff information. The client kind of drives what's possible there, but it allows the provider to create their space to market and advertise their program. It also allows them then to update quickly their openings. And so, if only every 6 months they have an opening because they're maybe a small in-home provider, or maybe once a year, they can just quickly hop on and put that opening up and quickly fill that slot without having to like create a whole marketing machine themselves, or wait for, word of mouth referral to come by. We have tools that connect parents and providers right within the platform. So things like tour scheduling and messaging. So parents can quickly find where there is care that matches their needs and has openings. But then the provider also knows that parent is coming to them through the system, because they'll receive, for example, an email that says someone found you on Jeffco Families, and they like to schedule a tour. And so that drives, again, the value. So providers see, oh, okay, when I participate in this platform and I put more information in, I get more back. And they can see that direct, what we call closing the loop, that direct connection to their effort and engagement to supporting their business. And then notifications. So I'll show you some more of what that can look like further in the presentation, but that instead of just kind of stagnant information, actively engaging in that. So for example, if a provider puts up an opening, a parent will be pinged, hey, that provider that you were interested in has an opening. And again, just more quickly filling those slots and supporting that provider's business. And again, just to reiterate, that was all on the topic of adding value for providers. So really getting provider buy-in that is positive for them and their business and parents in their community to engage in this platform and provide this data. It's really just a byproduct that data then gets to the state administrators, because that's not really something that's going to motivate them in their business. So we're really supporting their business, but getting the value of data. And then reducing friction. And I think this is really, really key, because on the other two, if you don't make it easy, the other two fronts are just always going to fail, in our opinion. And again, this is where Bridge Care really comes in with our user experience expertise. It's not just about creating pretty, nice websites. It's really about driving higher engagement by reducing friction and supporting and actually fitting in with existing processes. So one of the ways to do that is multiple methods of reporting, texting, emailing, an online portal. And I'll even get into the nuance of how we even reduce within that the friction. Streamlining experience, so really connecting tools together. So that's why we have that wheel. So for example, the place where a provider can go to apply for a grant also could be the place where they submit their availability. So also where they submit their attendance. So really connecting those experiences for providers to be a catch-all, and instead of adding just another thing that they have to do. So fitting in with their existing processes. And then why we have such a great relationship with Opportunities Exchange, and one of the beliefs that I think we really share is also integration with childcare management software. And really, again, to the most extent of all the things I've mentioned, fitting in with provider existing process and not adding things to their plate. So for those providers that use childcare management software, which is certainly not everyone, but for those who do, providing the integration so that they actually don't have to do anything extra in their day to get that data to you, the state administrator, and to the local communities for supporting. So I'm going to go into like more of I think integration around childcare management software is fairly straightforward. If there are questions about that, we can definitely address those in the end. But I'm going to mostly talk about that value add section and then the multiple methods of reporting parts of it, because that's where really like the software and technology and the user experience is quite differentiated and adds a lot of value there. So first on reporting availability, this is what it looks like within the BridgeCare software. This is the provider portal. So this is one method of reporting availability. And some things I want to point out here is that we have the last updated date. So we have full history tracking. So we know exactly when the last update was. So if someone hasn't updated in 6 months, we know that that's not a current opening. But we also have the ability for them to say openings shown are up to date. So if in fact they just haven't had any change to availability, but they haven't said anything to us for 6 months, we won't know, right? If that is current and just hasn't changed, or if it is stale and we need to engage them. So having the ability to say, yep, still the same, whether it be in the portal here or in other ways through texting and email, that allows us to capture the last date reported, even if nothing's changed. So that's one thing we do. We also have the ability to say, I don't have any openings. So just quickly with a button say, okay, I've filled all my slots, even if they've had multiple open. And then I'll show you next how we think about even what is an opening. But some of these things mentioned here, I don't have openings, and openings shown are up to date. What does it say? Up to date, yeah. Are some of those small but really meaningful ways that we can really up provider engagement and up the data and reporting so we know how effective our data collection efforts are. So this is what it looks like in BridgeCare to add an opening. And I think this is a really interesting topic because we, in our experience across the country, and in talking with providers and really understanding how they operate their businesses, ran into an issue with the way that typical availability reporting was done. And it was done where there was just standard licensed age groups, and then a provider would put in, do I have one opening for toddler, one opening for preschool, how many openings each age group? But in working directly with providers so closely, we learned that, and I'm sure many of you know this, that's really not how many providers think about their business. They might, for example, have an opening for might have an opening just not for infant, right? So any age group but infant, or depending on how your licensing works in your state, there are certain requirements like 2 under 3. So there are different ratios, and there are different ways that, let's say, a family home provider breaks out their business compared to a preschool, compared to an all ages center. And so in order to have one system that supports all those different business types, it really isn't just a matter of, oh, that's a nice to have. We ran into some really significant data integrity issues. For example, when a provider would say to us in plain language, well, I have one opening for toddler or preschool. Well, how would they report that in a normal system where they would say one toddler, one preschool? They would be forced to choose to either put one in for toddler or one in for preschool, which, if you think about that incentive and value for them, their value of putting this information in is to be put in front of parents looking for that care, right? So if that's their motivation, they should put in the maximum number that they have, because they want to show up in a search for toddler or preschool. But if they do it that way, then that means they put one for toddler, one for preschool. They've reported 2 openings. And when you look at that at scale, they've now doubled the amount of openings that we see at a system level. So that's really problematic, right? In terms of really, for us all and for you all, understanding how many openings you have per age group. So we found that out after having worked with clients for some time, and they had asked us, we just want to collect number of openings per toddler, per preschool, per school age, and so forth. And we found this pretty glaring issue. So what we did was we talked to over 100 providers directly, and we just called them and said, how many openings do you have? Or I think we might have said, I have a child, I'm looking for care. What age groups can you take? And they told us in their language. So we just documented, and this is what we bring in terms of user experience design. We heard from them as users of this software, how they would respond in their own words and how their business is structured. And many home providers would say, I have 2 openings for any age group, or I can take one child, but we don't do under 6 months, for example. Even though we fit in the infant age group, we can't take anyone under 6 months. And so that's how we've designed this solution, to be able to first and foremost collect the correct and accurate data for that provider, and then display that in reporting and dashboards for our clients to answer their questions. So really starting from the question instead of just data for the sake of data. And we have successfully actually transformed the way that entire states collect their availability data along these lines, because at the end of the day, it is actually about data integrity. And it's also about supporting providers' businesses. So here's a good example I'm just showing you here. Louise, do you have a question?
Yeah, Jamie, so now can you show us like an end report so that we could see sort of what is, because my brain is going, well, this doesn't necessarily tell me how many openings are there for 4-year-olds. I'm just curious to see what the end data looks like.
I don't have that right here, but I can talk about it. And then I'm happy to, if there are others interested in, or maybe we do another session on data reporting or something, we could do that, or I could talk one-on-one with folks. But let me quickly just show you here what that ends up meaning when I put in, and then I'll talk about what that means for options, because it's a great question. So we also have the date available. So it starts with how many openings do you have? Because that's really like, what do I have? How many slots? Okay, when is it going to be open? Who is it for? And so we still have the ability to restrict by license age group. So it's just not a total free for all. So I should also preface that all of this is totally up to our client, and states can configure this system however they want. So if they want to do it the old traditional way, we still are able to support that. We just encourage you to think about it this way. So in this case, this provider has an opening for a toddler and a preschool, right? Preschooler. So they just can't take an infant because they're already at their capacity for ratios. And so then this minimum maximum age pre-populates based on the age groups you've selected that are in the presets of the system. But if for like an infant I mentioned, right? A lot of times you can take an infant, but just by your center's policy, you don't take under 6 weeks or 6 months or something. And so you can make that adjustment so that a parent looking for care for a certain age still knows if it doesn't meet their own requirements. And then you click save, and then here's where it goes. So this is the provider experience. So now you can see that I had a preschool slot before, and I deleted my school age one. And now I have one for infant or toddler. And so what that means for your data reporting then is actually we can display it more than one way. Because right, it's starting with accurate data and then visualizing that data or reporting that data and to answer your question. So I love what you said, Luis, because it was starting with the question. How many openings do I have for 4-year-olds? So if you want to know how many, like at this moment in our state, how many 4-year-olds can we support? What I would recommend then is to have that be one. That slot represent one slot that could support 4-year-olds. Usually, often the question is infants, right? How many infants could we take at this very moment? Well, it doesn't matter if it could go to a toddler, it could go to an infant, it could go to an infant, right? So that's how we typically will report that. So that would be a whole one slot. And in comparison, you could say, how many slots do we have? And you could divide it, right? So you could say, you could divide it by 2. So how many children can the system support at this moment? So you can have it be by age group, or you could divide it by 2. So for example, because it's 2 programs, 2 different age groups, you divide that one and it's half a slot each. So sometimes states will choose to represent it that way. And sometimes they'll say, okay, but how many do I have for this age group right now? And then you'll represent a 1 for that slot. Are you following me? I'm going to just look at Luis, but if anyone has questions, let me know.
That's all right. Keep going. I think what I need is dashboards and you don't have it. So let's just keep going.
I have a look at what dashboards are, but I don't have the detail.
Go ahead.
Yeah. But basically you could, on a high level, it could be 1 slot each, because you could think of it as just how many can we support of each group, or you could divide it by 2. And that's totally up to the client, how they want to configure that. You could divide it by 2 because it's across 2 age groups that you have 1 slot. If it was across 3 age groups, you divide it by 3. I know it's fairly complicated, so if anyone else has questions, please let me know. But again, I think it's worth the complexity, because this gets you the right data at the end of the day.
Well, Jamie, I have a quick question. First of all, I think your methodology around this was brilliant, to go out and ask providers this question and really get from their mouth what they're trying to accomplish, and then to make that work in software is tricky. So I applaud you for that. But okay, in the last example, you said if you divide by 3 and you have 1/3 of a slot in each of these categories, then when you fill one, that's 1 slot now that's taken, and the other ones go away?
In the data or on this dashboard?
Both. Yeah, give me both.
Yeah,
scenarios.
So exactly. Yeah. So in the dashboard, if you only have 1 for, this is an or scenario, not an and scenario, right? So I can take 1 child for infant or toddler. And so in that case, if you fill that 1 slot, it's gone. You go to 0, you push down. Oops, this is PowerPoint, so it doesn't work. But you push the minus button here, and then you just have 0 slots. If all your slots have filled, you say, I don't have any openings, and they all go away. And it just says you don't have any openings. So what that would do if it was divided by 2, if you have half, if you represent a half on infant and a half in toddler, then yeah, both those halves go away in your data reporting on the macro level, because the whole slot was filled.
I suspect, Jamie, that this is primarily a problem for family childcare, because in centers, the classrooms are very much divided by age groups. So unless you're an unusual center with mixed ages, it's probably much more direct, correct?
Well, it really comes into play with infants because of ratios. But I mean, the majority of providers are family childcares, right? So the majority of our users, that does impact. But yeah, I would say that that's true. It's more straightforward when you have very separate classrooms for very specific age groups. well, but then I think it might be Texas, where it's actually a very common problem that they have. And they have like 3-4-year-old classrooms, but the licensed age group split, something like that. So even sometimes where there are classrooms that span age groups, because they don't fall in line with the way that the state has designated age groups. Yeah, Sharon, I have to get you those examples, but I know it has come up more than just family child cares. And I think in particular in Texas, we've run into it quite a lot.
Okay.
But then, for example, in Pennsylvania, there are licensed age groups, but providers aren't limited by the age group. Like they don't have a license capacity per age group. Some states do. I know in Pennsylvania, they don't. They just have specific ratios. So I think it's also sometimes when ratios don't perfectly align with age groups all the time. I know it's another thing we've encountered in Connecticut with certain like number of children under certain ages that aren't totally aligned with licensing. So it's actually a fairly common problem, and it is not just a family child care issue. I'm going to skip ahead because of what Kelly just mentioned, which is that that talking to providers in plain language, collecting their information. So moving on from the provider portal, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to circle back on that. But moving on from the provider portal of how we collect information, it's the same methodology, but we can collect it by texting as well. And how we do this here is, imagine you're a provider who opts in for texting. So first of all, texting has to be opted into by law. So we, in our onboarding experience, we do a push around texting. That's not going to be right for every provider. Like a provider who owns 15 locations is never going to want to text us about all 15 locations. They're going to want to use the provider portal. They're probably going to have an administrator. Jeffco Public Schools is a great example of this with 53 preschools. Like they're not going to do that by texting. They're going to use the portal. But for those family child cares or smaller centers, texting is a great way for them because they're the typically folks who don't have anyone sitting at a computer all day. They're rarely on their email. Their phone is often with them. And they're often the folks that for us, they're hardest to reach, right? Because they are busy. They're not on technology all day. And they don't typically use like established systems very often. Maybe they don't use childcare management, for example, at all. But we can text them. And here's an example of a type of text we would send. So last time you reported this, is that still correct? So they can quickly just say yes. And then we've noted it, right? That, okay, there hasn't been a change, but we know that the information is correct still. Or they could say, last time you had 1 spot for an infant. So you could say, oh, now I have 2 spots for an infant, or I fill my infant slot. And then we update their information automatically for them. They don't have to log into the portal to do that. Or they could just say back, I don't have any openings now. So they can just respond to us by text. And because we make that so easy for them, and they don't have to remember, oh gosh, what did I say last time? I don't even remember. It's not in front of me. I don't have technology right here. We get really, really high response rate because it's really speaking to them. Something like, I think 85% response rate on text messaging, really, really high response. Back to email. So this is what an example of an automated email can look like, where they can say, again, that I have openings and go to report what those openings are, or my openings haven't changed. I don't have openings. And I think these are really not to be underestimated because that is click of a button. And we've gotten that engagement from them, and we know the quality of the data that we have. And we know for parents who are looking for care, if that information is useful for them. We also offer 20-minute one-to-one sessions if they need help or support. And we offer the ability to opt for text messaging instead of emails with every single email we send.
So Jamie, Kelly had a question. Is there anything that triggers a text message, or are they sent on a regular schedule? If a provider says, this is my preferred way, how do they get the text message? and how
Yeah,
often?
typically we send them weekly, but our clients can determine the frequency of
Okay.
the emails. And then anytime, that's the reminders we send weekly. Anytime this provider can respond back to that same message, they can save it in their phone and respond back to say, hey, had a family just leave. I have an opening, or I'm going to have an opening starting January 1st. And they can text.
Okay,
And same with, they can log into their portal anytime. And we do definitely have providers logging in to manage their openings in between availability updates.
great.
Thank you.
And then again, getting back to the why would a provider do this? Why do they care? It's not so that you have numbers. They probably don't care that much about that. It is so families can find them, or so families know that they're full and that they can move on to the next opening in the next place quickly. I think, what we know about this industry is that providers care a lot about children, a lot about families, a lot about the people they're working with. So that, in our experience, is a huge driver for helping make these connections and to support their business, hopefully, as well. So here's what it looks like on just a view of a parent portal, so a parent experience, and where the provider can create and market their program. Some of the things we also have is like ability for families to look along their commute, to see what the commute time is, to look between two places. We allow providers to put in, depending on what our client decides in their configurations, to put in additional information beyond just what licensing has, to really help the families identify, is this a place that can support my needs around specialized care or certain types of curriculum or meals or transportation. Again, getting the benefits of all that data back to, as well, the state administrator or local organizations. And photos and things like that again, parents are really looking for, and licensing databases just typically don't have.
So Jamie, I'm not sure if you're going to cover this, but since you switched to families, I just want to ask this question. I know that in at least one place you're building an API directly with one child care management system. And what I'm assuming that anytime a new child is enrolled or a family unenrolls because they leave the program, that would be yet another way to update the system that the provider doesn't even have to think about. Am I
Yes.
correct in that assumption?
Yes, exactly. That was in my beginning slides, that I can't remember what I had called.
You did say connecting to CPMS. Yes, you did say that. I just want to make sure that's how it functions.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's based on enrollment numbers. It actually depends on the child care management software. So we actually, with each integration of child care management software or other outside vendors we work with, which we have multiple and we're working on more,
Right.
and really those integrations come from state and client demand. So we're happy to integrate with whoever you need to and want to be able to integrate with. And usually what motivates those partners to do that is by state saying, hey, we would like to collect your data and make you more supportive of the providers in our state. And usually that works really well.
Right.
But with each one, we map to their data structures. So they'll all be slightly different, but we work with them to do that through API connection. But yes, all for the benefit of the provider having to do nothing to update this information in the portal. And this is, again, supporting that idea of adding value for providers and marketing their business. So this is actually the email that I got in our test account. So it just says hello. But when I was prepping these slides and I put in the added opening for that infant or that toddler preschool slot that I was just talking to you about, I received this information because I had favorited here on the parent portal that I liked that provider. And because as a parent, I had favorited it, was on my list, we send notifications to parents when there's an opening for one of their favorited providers, so that they can instantly fill that slot, or near instantly, hopefully reach out to the provider to help providers fill slots quickly, to help parents find openings where they're looking for care quickly. So on one of the points I said earlier, it was connecting parents and providers, like with tours and with messaging. And here's another example of how we're connecting those parents. And it says Child Care Connections at the top, right? So that's our Bridge Care fake demo brand. But if it was your system, it would say, your system's name. So providers know that you're supporting their business and you're supporting them by connecting them with parents. And that's really generates a lot of appreciation from providers of our clients, and that they put these systems in place to help their businesses. And also helps, of course, like I said, show them the value of providing that data and engaging with the system.
Okay, so Kelly, Miles has a question about whether or not that information. So Kelly's question, does that notice also go to the back end CE administrators to help navigate families? So Kelly, it sounds like you're talking about more personalized, customized, individualized support for families. Is there a way for them to be looped into the system if the family needs one-on-one help? Is that the gist of your question? And feel free to unmute. Okay.
And by CE, sorry, I shouldn't have used an acronym. I meant coordinated enrollment, and of course for early care and education. So there'd be the family saying, these are my favorites, but there's no openings. The back end system admins know that those are their favorites. Something pops up, but there just needs to be a little bit of hand holding. With the back end system admins also see that an opening popped up for a favorite for one of their families.
Right. Yep.
So for coordinated enrollment, that can be a lot of things, but typically that's like a whole coordinated application and enrollment process, which incorporates a whole bunch of things I'm not at all covering today, which has other ways as well of identifying where you're interested in care and connecting those matches. But on a high level, yes, on the administrator side, where again, I'm not covering that terribly today, other than just from a reporting perspective, because we're just talking about supply and demand here. But you have all those data insights of where folks are clicking. For example, how many searches were done in this zip code for care, that overnight care, for example. And well, we know that there's a dearth of overnight care in this area. And so we want to support helping increase, and actually maybe even supporting providers' businesses to tell them, hey, there are parents looking for overnight care. You might consider adding that, could help fill slots faster and help support your business. So there's the ability to, again, that supply and the matching for the benefit of increasing the supply that's needed, supporting providers around meeting demand and supporting their business. And yes, all those kind of insights are received on the administrator side in their data dashboards. And also when families engage the system, once they create an account, it creates a family profile within the administrator backend. So you can support them from a CCR&R and coordinated enrollment perspective.
So can we move over to that now? Maybe, I don't know if you've got a lot more on this, but I'm wondering, I'm guessing that people are kind of anxious to start to see. So what does this mean for me as, an administrator of public funds?
Yeah, I'm off the provider and family side now. I think sorry if it felt like a long time on that, but I think it's just really important, because when we talk about collecting supply, a lot of times people just think, take a number, just like anyone fill out a form anywhere. And that just doesn't work. What we've seen really across the country is that when it's just a simple form and you're not really thinking through the provider and parent experience of what's the value for them, we see really low engagement rates. So unless you're going to be mandating this on license requirements, which no one is talking that we've spoken to is talking about doing, we have to be thinking about how to build into the value for providers. Right. Before I go to the administrators, okay, I'll skip ahead then, and then I'll come back to I'll come back to Jeffco. So from an analytics perspective, here's what we can offer. And I don't have it specifically tied to those openings that I showed you, like I said, but we have analytics dashboards, which are completely configurable to what you want to look at. So kind of standardized reporting where you can see changes over time. You can see breakdown by like visualizations around breakdown by age group, counties. Like I said, if there's gaps in where there's high demand and low supply, we can configure those dashboards to your needs, and there are filters as well, so you can look at those as you need. And we have multiple dashboards, so in our default dashboards, but again, can be configured to what you want. So we have an overview, supply, demand, quality, engagement, and performance, and each of those have detail within them. That's your just analytics view. I think what's really powerful is that beyond that extensive reporting, where any piece of data that comes into the system can be extracted by our clients, so they can set up ongoing reports that are there for them to access anytime, that are like their standard reports that they always want to look at. We can have scheduled reports that go out weekly or monthly. They can go out to partners or just internally by email. And then we also have just the ability to do ad hoc reporting. And, you know, if the governor calls or someone on the governor's staff calls and they're doing a press conference and they need this information, you have access to your own data to pull it in this report builder within your own system. And that is really powerful, because can't tell you how many times that's come up, and to actually have the data available in your own hands is really powerful. So that's what I've prepared on the reporting end of things, but this is what the administrator dashboard looks like. I'm really thinking about it from the perspective of data, because that's mostly what our state administrators are doing from a supply and demand perspective. Again, we have other modules like coordinated enrollment and subsidy that have a lot more functionality behind them, and all connect. It's a system, right? So none of these pieces are really totally siloed, and that's why we've developed a streamlined system. But for the CCR&R folks that we work with, so maybe some state administrators are thinking, okay, how do we work with our CCR&Rs around this? We also have the ability to update provider information within the system, do a family intake within the system, log a referral, complete a referral outside of just the online portal. That's all also within this system. And we just separate those functions with permissions if we have multiple different organizations engaging in the same space.
So Kelly asked a question, which I was about to answer, but I'll let you do it. Are you saying that clients can construct their own customized reports versus having to ask you for
Yes,
a specific kind of report?
yeah, and all of the above. So we can create them for you, or you can create them yourselves, but the report builder empowers our client to be able to access their own data, create their own reports.
Wow, I'm so glad that we're in the 21st century now. That's amazing. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's really our overall philosophy. Is it's your data. We don't own it. You own it. We want you to have it. We want you to have access to it. We want you to use it. You know, we want you to be able to report it and use it and make better choices with it, and be able to also like report out the good work that is being done, because we know a lot of work is being done. But we also know that folks come to us all the time saying, like, we have a sense that, you know, for example, the vast majority of family childcares are women of color, but we actually have no demographic data around that. So it's really hard to justify, you know, funding around a particular strategy, which we know in our gut anecdotally is the right way to go, but we don't have the data to support it. This system is, the whole goal of it is to help support that, or find out that maybe your gut was wrong, you know, but most of the time it's not. It's just you need the data to support it.
So I know I'm asking you to jump around a bit, and I apologize for that, but I wonder if we could now maybe engage your partner and
Great.
talk a little bit about what you're doing on the ground in Jeffco, Jefferson County.
Yeah.
Over there.
Thanks, Sharon. Great moderate. We can be flexible, right? So I just want to briefly speak to this divided early childhood education system. there aren't a lot of great examples of this collaboration. Because between childcare, Head Start, preschool, and then like the number of other organizations as well in any given community or state that are supporting early childhood. Sometimes there are great collaborations, and we are seeing more and more of it, and certainly where folks are trying to go. But there are just kind of inherent barriers with separate funding sources, different departments, and like general over historical lack of coordination. So I brought on Rula from Jefferson County, Colorado, which is often referred to as Jeffco. And Jeffco Families is an organization that is BridgeCare's client that we work with. It's actually a collaboration of different entities like public health and their CCR&R and their public schools. It was actually initiated, interestingly, by the public school system. And it was because this is what they had for their listing of their 53 different pre-K programs. And they started out with just each of the different pre-K programs having their own tracking. And they still do have kind of their own systems, because the Jeffco Public Schools is not the owner of Jeffco Families. They're a user of it. They're a provider, and they report their availability as a provider. But the whole collaboration is around everything supporting the families in Jeffco around their care and education needs. So licensing data is in here. We work, like I said, with the CCR&R, and they use the system for their functions, but then also the Jeffco Public Schools pre-K programs are reported into here as well. So Rula, you're on video, right? Yeah, okay, I found you.
On mute.
Great. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, because this was all a little last minute, and I really appreciate Rula hopping in for this, because like I said, it was actually very difficult for us to find like really true collaboration and engagement from the public schools. What we've heard from a lot of our clients is that they've had a hard time with that. And I think that's why Opportunities Exchange asked us to speak on this topic, because if we're not collecting data from pre-K programs, which are part of the ECE system, then we're not getting the full picture of our supply and demand. So Rula, could you just speak a little bit about what you do and what your team does and how they engage with the Jeffco Families Plus and BridgeCare?
Sure. So I'm the lead tech in the early learning department, and we have 7 technicians that work closely with families. They work closely with enrollment from step A to step Z, completing the enrollment. And we started with BridgeCare last year, and pretty much the techs, they each have their own schools. We have 53 preschools in Jeffco, and they're all kind of split between the 7 techs, and they manage those preschools, and they do manage the BridgeCare website. And pretty much what they have to do, as Jamie said, and I've talked to the techs, few simple clicks to update the availability for each preschool. And they do that about once a month. And once, again, if the preschool is full, all they have to click on is no availability at this time. And then they don't have to touch it unless, they have a withdrawal and more families, we want to have that spot open for other families.
Great. And can you talk about, so the thing that we find so much is that folks say like, well, the preschool just has no incentive, the public school has no incentive to report their availability for preschools. So why are you and your team motivated to participate in this so consistently now for over a year?
I think the main reason is to help families. I think it's a great way to share data with families to kind of help them with the process of finding the best fit for them, the best preschool that they are looking for, or the best childcare that they are looking for. A lot of times we do get a call for, family who is not, as you know, I mean, I don't know, Jeffco Public Schools, you have to be 3 by a certain date to enroll in Jeffco Public Schools. And some of the calls we get, the students are not, they're not going to meet that criteria. So we refer them to Bridge Care to check other availability that would be close to them, that would fit their need. Because after all, it's just working together, sharing all the data that is available to those families to just help them find the best care and best need for their family.
Right. And then also, I think I've heard from you that at the beginning of the school year, sometimes there's some open slots, enrollments fluctuating because you didn't know who's going to come from the prior year and who kind of where the dust ends up settling. And so it is also, I think you've said, valuable to have those listings to help fill those like odds and ends openings. Have you found that as well?
Exactly. So last year was our first year with Bridge Care. So we kind of, and then the techs, they take kind of a 6 weeks off in the summer. So everything kind of is on hold with enrollment and stuff. So we didn't do a whole lot over the summer last year with Bridge Care, but I think what we're hoping to do this year, again, if we can have like as we talked yesterday, Jamie, like a master login for all of our preschools, then probably over the summer, because we start registration for public schools actually now, except Enroll Jeffco is down right now. So we start the process now for next year, and then everything goes on hold over the summertime. So then what I think our plan to do this summer is to update all of the availability. So if people are checking things over the summer, they can see what's available, what's open. When the texts return, then they're ready to help the parents.
Yeah. Great. I see something in the chat. Did you say Jeffco's Bridge Care also includes
Head Start, early Head Start? Yeah, could you talk about who else besides the public school? I think you started to, but I haven't quite comprehended. So what are your various data sources that are feeding this website?
So to be honest with you, off the top of my head, I don't know if Jeffco specifically has early Head Start and Head Start incorporated in their data system, but I certainly know that we have clients that are pulling in early Head Start and Head Start programs. Really, the way that Bridge Care works is it's your system. We call it like the pipes, like, we're your infrastructure and you do with it what you want. So where you can pull in collaborations and data sharing agreements with community stakeholders like early Head Start and public schools, or maybe it's not, and it's just public schools, it's your overall pre-K program. Like Bridge Care is working with first class pre-K program in Alabama statewide, and that includes all kinds of different pre-K programs. But then there's collaboration with the child care system as well, and licensed childcare. So where we can be pulling those stakeholders together, that's really more of a political question than it is for Bridge Care, a technology question, because we can support pulling in all that data from those different systems.
If a community, if the Head Start programs in the community were using Child Plus, could you pull data from there if they made that available to you? I'm assuming you could do
Yes,
that.
and actually, we already have an integration with ProCare, and Child Plus was just acquired recently by ProCare. So I think fairly soon that it'll be even easier to do that, but yes, we can.
Oh, that's news.
Yeah, it was news like last week or so.
That's kind of big.
Yes. But yeah, and ProCare is one of the childcare management software we already have integration with. So yeah, Head Start data as well. Head Start and early Head Start.
Well, that's blowing up the chat. Yes, everybody, that's that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So
Lots of shakeup in the industry right now. So, and I think all, for the better. I mean, that's an, indication of like streamlining information, consolidating of technology, data and services.
So do people have questions for Rula? And I actually have one I want to start with. So have you gotten feedback from the community, either from the, folks who are working in the system, that this is helping them find families faster and keep their enrollment up, or from families using the system? Do you have anything to tell us about?
I know, and I've talked to the techs a little bit about it, and I've had few calls actually, but when they call and our, let's say, public school or our preschool that they are interested in is not available or it's not going to meet, we give them the website. They truly appreciate it, and they're very thankful that, we gave them the link, and we have had feedback that it is very easy to use the link and very easy to kind of, find the information that they are looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it does, I mean, it really is pretty simple. It tells you, like, if you're looking for driving, you can type your address and then it pulls up what are the closest to you. You can use your work address if you want to, use a daycare that's close to work. And then it gives, whether I believe it also asks if you want transportation or not. So it's very simple website to use and to try to help parents that are trying to find a quality daycare for their kids.
Yeah, right.
And I just would like to say that Jamie and her team were very supportive and helpful in the beginning of this process, because again, the whole team is trying to learn something new, and they met with us and did a kind of a one-on-one training with the whole team and stuff. So they're very supportive and answered any questions we have.
Great, thanks. Louise, you got your hand raised?
Yeah, I have a couple questions for Ruka. So the first question is, you said you have 53 programs. Does that mean 53 classrooms or 53 sites?
53 sites.
And how many classrooms?
So some sites have 1 classroom, some have up to 3.
In total, how many classrooms do you have?
Oh boy.
Average of 2.
Yeah,
It's okay.
average of 2. So probably, close to 100 classrooms probably.
Okay, thanks. And then the second question is, and I actually have 2 more questions, but one question is, do you do any of your enrollment electronically? Like, I know that Jamie has the capacity to click here to to fill out enrollment applications. Are you using any of that functionality of?
We're not using any of the Bridge Care enrollment functionality because Jefferson County has a separate enrollment process. So right now we're still part of the Enroll Jeffco process enrollment. So that's what we are using for our preschools. It's the same process, PK through 12, that all parents use in Jefferson County. That's what we're using for our preschools.
Got it. Okay.
Rula, we have, I think you were on the call with Julie, where we were talking about integrating with that process more. So that is actually something we're working through, whether all of it be under Bridge Care eventually, or we just integrate that experience. But that is one of the things that I think is important to point out, beyond the stuff we've talked about today on that wheel and that circle of all the different things that are under the scope of it, state administrators and local organizations. It doesn't have to all be Bridge Care's product to make that to have the benefits of integration, to have the benefits of streamlining experience and better data collection. And so sometimes, I mean, of course, in our ideal world, use everything with Bridge Care, right? But we know that, for example, Enroll Jeffco was already there, and it's been there right? And it was
Yeah.
actually relatively new when Bridge Care came onto the scene. So while maybe they would have wanted to use everything Bridge Care, they just kind of went through that transition. And I'm sure everyone on the call is something like that, right? Where it's like, oh, well, maybe if I'd known about that, but now we've got this. And so we know that we have to be able to support, if we're truly about creating better streamlined systems and better data collection, you know, API connection and integration is critical to us really living into that value for us and our clients. So we can kind of like really meet you where you're at with what systems you already have in place and make sure that we're still supporting those efforts.
That makes sense. And then my last question is, so this is probably even a forward-thinking question for you, Ruka, but we are moving into a world of diverse delivery. We're moving into a world where schools are going to be required, assuming the federal legislation passes, that program that families can choose between market-based childcare and a public school site. So I'm just curious about right now, do you it sounds like you don't do diverse delivery, that all pre-K is only in the public schools. But am I correct in assuming that?
I'm sorry. I'm not
Okay,
sure
I'll give you a
exactly
concrete
what.
example. I'm
Yeah.
Mary Jones. I have a 4-year-old. I call up and say, I want public pre-K.
Uh-huh.
Your pre-K slot, you would say to Mary Jones, I have an opening at Blue Heron, or
Yeah.
I have an opening at a private childcare that isn't in the public schools. Do your workers do that, or how does that process work?
No, we don't give, I mean, we just offer what our 53 preschools have availability for. So then if they're not interested in what we're offering them, that's when we refer them to Bridge Care, so they can type, you know, their address or whatever it is they need to search for different pre-K.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, we do not provide, you know, availability for other pre-Ks.
There's something also context around Colorado where they've passed universal pre-K. And so there's a lot of changes coming down.
Yeah, that'll be in the 23-24 school year, I think. Yeah.
So that's how it is today, Luis, but things are shifting, like you said.
Yeah.
And that would be more mixed delivery, I believe.
Kelly, go ahead and ask your question. I always learn about 4 new terms when I'm on a call with you. So
I'll try to speak plain old English. So the enrolled Jeffco P12 platform, is that a student information system like Power School or Synergy or Harmony or Skyward, something like that?
I'm not familiar with the other, maybe Jamie knows about the other platforms more, but Enroll Jeffco is pretty much kind of like your family profile. You have to go to Enroll Jeffco, fill out the information that for your family, for your student, and that's where you apply for your students to be enrolled in Jefferson County from PK on to 12th grade.
So the Jefferson County School District, they either developed that themselves or they bought something, or it's connected to their student information system so that they can enroll and then register.
Yes.
And then Bridge Care is working to try to integrate with that SIS.
Yeah, I don't, Enroll Jeffco is not the SIS. I don't believe, I'm pretty sure it's not. It's a separate system outside of the SIS that's just about the enrollment piece.
Mm-hmm.
But Kelly, to your question, and maybe just more broadly from Jeffco, we can integrate with student information systems as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, in Virginia, we've got 133 school divisions. Typically, they have something sit outside of their SIS for enrollment that sometimes seamlessly integrates, you know, in bigger systems. Smaller ones, they re-enter it into the SIS, just providing ample opportunities to get the student information wrong. But yeah, I think that Virginia is looking more for the kind of thing that Enroll Jeffco is, seamlessly integrating with SIS to then also have that create unique student identifiers for younger kiddos and that kind of stuff.
Well, and in Jefferson County, you know, Enroll Jeffco kind of works hand in hand with the campus, Infinite Campus. I'm not sure if any of you familiar with Infinite Campus, but that's also where the parents kind of update information, upload all kind of documents that is required for enrollment.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, a registration.
So it's kind of like the first step to kind
Mhm.
of enroll and accept an offer, and then it takes them to a different system, which is Infinite Campus, where they have to verify all the information and upload all the documents that are required for enrollment.
Gotcha. So they may have three pieces: the enroll, the registration, and then there might be a student information system for the day-to-day operation of
Yes.
school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that
yes.
sounds good.
The Infinite Campus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Kelly, again, I tried to be really diligent about speaking to supply and demand because that was the topic of this webinar. But I'd be happy to talk offline with you about coordinated enrollment systems and the options that BridgeCare has and what we're doing across the country on that front around blending. And
Yeah, I'm the project manager for the Virginia doing that. So you and I have been in touch, and we will be in touch again very soon.
Great. Yep.
So, Jamie, I'm afraid I may have derailed when you were talking a little bit more about parent. You talked a lot about how you get providers to put their openings into the system. And I truly, I think that you really are talking about something that's pretty critical in this, because it's really clear that childcare providers are real busy and they're just not going to stop and remember to log in or do something unless it's easy and unless there's a really good reason to do it. What we didn't get to talk about quite as much, and I just want to make sure I'm clear about, is how do you collect information about what parents are looking for? Do you track everything? Do they have to register? Can you talk a little bit about the demand side of the equation?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the demand side, and really in any market, we don't really see this as a true marketplace because we're not actually recruiting providers, right? We're starting with licensed providers or working with an already existing infrastructure, but there are similarities to a marketplace where you have to have enough value on each side to get the other interested and engaged, right? Like providers provide the information because parents are going to be looking for it. Parents come here because providers have put the information in. So it's critical that we are thinking about how are we driving value for parents and how are we driving value for providers and how are we most efficiently matching them together, because that's what makes the whole system work to collect the data. So starting from there really is, it's a chicken egg thing. So there really is no one starting point, but if we started from the point of providers, we're successfully getting really valuable information about providers into this parent portal so that families coming can find what they're looking for. So that's kind of a fundamental layer of having valuable information that they're looking for. Once they're there, they first put in the information here along the top of this view. So the address, and like Rula mentioned, they could look by home. So we have, actually, I'll skip back to the other view because I have a couple different views of what the parent can do here. Where did I skip it? Here. So home, work, other, along my commute, we can also add zip code. Often states want that zip code option because of that requirement to list providers by zip code. So, and then they could do along my commute. So you could look from place to place so that you don't have providers in the totally wrong direction. So really organizing around their needs. And this is an input that is collected on the demand side. So this can appear in your reporting, right? Where are they looking for care? You could filter it by county, by city, by zip code, by region, by school district, by even district, political district. Sometimes our clients ask for. So all of that is really how that data can be manipulated on the back end to show what you're looking for in your reporting. But we're collecting those interactions, those inputs. Where are parents looking? What are they looking for? So starting with what they put in for their information. So where they're looking, what age groups are looking for. And we do collect also method of transportation. So if you're interested in knowing, what % of families are looking for care by means of public transit, it's not as common, but we do have that as well. And then we have, like I said, all these different fields any field that you choose to configure into your system, because it's really your system. So like, for example, specialized care, that is then able to be filtered by the parent. So we can see what filters parents are engaging with to see where they're looking for. Really anything a parent is looking for is demand, right? And how many of them and where are they? That's what really makes up demand. So it's the interactions through the whole parent portal that are able to drive, to be displayed in analytics or reporting, and then to be able to demonstrate where is their demand and for what. We have some standard filters like looking for only providers that have availability. So only show me the ones that have availability because I need care stat and I can't wait, months to be on a waiting list. Or a filter for only show me places that accept childcare subsidy, so that we know percent of families looking for care that needs subsidy. And again, where they're looking for care and what kind of care they're looking for. School year or year round, part-time or full-time, overnight, weekend. I mean, like I said, sky's the limit of what you want to be able to configure in here. But those are kind of some of our standard
Do you
fields.
have anything in your deck that shows us a picture of sort of looking at demand, just to get our arms around it a little bit more?
I don't.
You don't, that's okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of demand here, like demand
Yeah.
by program type, demand by group, but this is just your overview dashboard. So I don't have a screenshot of that next demand one.
So as a parent, can I do a quote anonymous? Can I just log in, see what's there, and you'll pick up what I looked for, but you won't be picking up information about my family, right? Is that sort of how it works?
Yeah, that's right. So our belief, and this is configurable as well if you wanted to, although we highly discourage from it. We don't have parents create an account just to look, because what we found where we did have implemented that in past, and everyone has decided not to do it any longer, because it just reduces your access to the data you're looking to collect. Because mostly you care, what are people looking for, not what is their name and email address, right? So if they're just looking for care, we want to just collect that high level data from as many parents that are looking as possible, and collect that data, those insights. So they don't have to create an account for us to capture that information and display that in the dashboard. We do have the ability to create an account, and we require it as a next step for things like messaging, tour scheduling, favoriting, things that either require an email address to kind of correspond with the provider to go back and or to be able to access again in the future. So for example, a favorites list, so that that family can come back and revisit their favorites list as they're engaging in tours and applications and wait lists. They can continue to come back to it. So there's a trigger point in their engagement where we say, okay, create your account. And when we ask them to create an account, we want, again, frictionless as possible. So all we ask for is name, an email address, and we use passwordless authentication, which is very secure. If you have concerns about it, we can use other methods like passwords or single sign-on. But what that does is it means that they don't have to create another password. They don't have this barrier. I don't know if anyone else on the line has ever been like, never mind, not doing that. Another password in my life? No, thank you. So that takes that out of the equation. And then they can revisit it simply by just using that same email address again, or if they're on the same device, they can just come back to it within 60 days. So that's how we approach accounts.
So Kelly Pope, I think that she might have just answered your first question. So Bridge Care could ping a parent when the match is made if they've gone to that next level and said, yes, this is who I am. And these are the programs I want to know about. Let me know if there's availability, right? So it would require that second step. And then, so the next question is interesting. Is there a way, do you know of any places?
Sharon, I just want to make sure I'm
Yeah.
actually sure I understood that question. Does Bridge Care ping
Sure.
parents when a match is made? Which kind of match, Kelly? You mean like in coordinated enrollment systems?
Well, specifically like, okay, I need a Spanish speaking program and I need it to be on my commute. And so all of a sudden there's an available slot. Would Bridge Care do that matching? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what this is. If a parent expresses interest in a provider because they meet their needs, but they didn't have an opening at the time, this pings them to say, yeah, that provider just listed an opening. Yep.
Got it.
And go
Great.
to that opening and reach out to that provider.
Okay, so now that prompted another question that I have, which is that one of the assumptions, as I've seen some demos of different systems, one thing I've seen is sometimes the portal will only show me programs that have an opening. And now I'm thinking, well, but if I don't see a program that doesn't yet have an opening, how do I know that that might be a program that I want? Can you answer that little detail?
Right. I mean, every family's different. Like I might be pregnant and looking for a slot 6 months from now, or I might have just lost my regular childcare for one reason or another, and I need the most immediate option I can find to get to work, next week. I'm taking all my sick time, right, to just like make it. So the urgency with which people are looking for care and how, picky they can be about which care they're looking for varies. So we show all, and by default, we show all licensed care as well, because if a parent is driving by somewhere on, on their drive and they see one and they go to look for it on the system, we want to make sure they know all the data is here. Maybe they're not accepting families right now. The provider can put that in. Maybe they don't have availability. That's why we allow for filtering from that.
Okay.
So there's the filter that says only show me availability. And that's our first filter on the left-hand side. So make sure it's easy to find.
Okay. So I think the second part of Kelly's question, which is pretty interesting. So we at OpEx, we talk a lot about how state administrators can use this data for planning, right? And for making decisions about funding and about policy, about supply and demand. But do you know of any place that is feeding back information to providers? Say, there's an enormous need for this. Parents are looking for that. And how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, so on a product level, we actually have the option to have a provider dashboard in their provider portal, so they can see this many parents have messaged you, this many, you've had this many views, like, so again, like that closing the loop and driving that value so that the provider can actually see the value of engaging with the platform. But then on a more anecdotal level, talking with our clients, which we do really regularly, because that's a huge part of what Bridge Care does, is partner with our clients to make sure that they're successful ongoing and that we're continually improving the product to meet their needs. So we're hearing all the time about examples where particularly CCR and ours, who engage really regularly with providers, and providers might call and say, I'm really having trouble filling slots. What can I do? Right. And they'll say, well, they can look at their dashboard and say, well, okay, let's look at what people are looking for in your area. And, would you consider offering extended hours? Maybe extend your hours 1 or 2 hours. That could make a huge amount of difference, because 95% of providers in your area close at 6 and parents are looking for care till 8 or something like that, right? So they can use data in that way to support providers more one-on-one, or maybe through a shared services model as well. Like, providers engage and say, how might I use data, think differently about my business and make adjustments that could make actually really meaningful results in our bottom line.
Yeah, interesting.
Did we get the rest of the questions? Yes, that was the second one. Great. Any other questions from, anyone? We're a pretty small group, so it's
yeah, we're getting down there, but just feel free if anybody would like to just sort of offer up any topics either related to this or more generally. We're going to be offering a regular series starting in early January. And if you have any burning questions that you'd like to see us address through this, I'm happy to have people just sort of shout those questions out now, or
I actually have one more question for Jamie.
Yeah.
So I know we got derailed when you told us that ProCare had just bought Child Plus. But let's go back to Head Start for just a minute. So do you have any clients do you have any Head Start programs that are using Bridge Care with their own recruitment, their own enrollment? Or is there any sort of, no, okay.
Not
They're
yet,
Pretty
no.
much only in the Head Start Child Plus kind of space.
Well, yeah, or we work with organizations who have collaboration with the Head Start entity in their community, and they collaborate to get the data into Bridge Care, either through an integration or just through like a really simple file upload somewhat
Right.
regularly.
Right.
So there's definitely collaboration with Head Starts, and honestly, it's just an area that we just have really had so much focus around childcare and pre-K programs, and actually a lot of focus in coordinated enrollment around those.
Yeah.
So we just haven't had a real focus in Head Start, but yeah, I don't think it's like that we would never be able to support them. We just don't have them right now.
Yeah, I mean, I just think going forward in the world that I envision we are walking into,
Mhm.
we are going to need centralized coordinated enrollment across all these funding streams. And we're going to have to really move away from pre-K recruiting its own families, Head Start recruiting its own families, each individual childcare provider, and to really start moving into an environment
Oh,
where we have much more centralized. And this kind of software just feels to me like is the roads and bridges of that work.
yeah, actually on that point, we do have clients doing coordinated enrollment and Head Start engaged in that way. We just don't have a client that is only Head Start, but we definitely do have clients, particularly around coordinated enrollment, where Head Start is engaged, and all either through a universal application or a streamlined, what feels like universal application to a family, one process to apply for many programs. We do have that in place.
This is Kelly Miles from Virginia, and it kind of feels like I used to be a lobbyist before I did IT, and it kind of feels like we're finally in early care and education having technology as a policy advocate, where before we were all doing paper and pencil, just like early intervention, and it was so hard to harness the data to, forcefully and compellingly advocate. And we also didn't have the technology that could make those linkages. And so why not just keep in your silos, and why not let inertia guide the politics of these different funding streams? And now that technology can bridge them, now from a politics standpoint, people have to bridge themselves. So I swear, I think I'm just not going to work for the rest of the year and call it done to hear that Child Plus. I have said 20 times this week, don't worry, Child Plus will get bought out, hoping to God I was not going to be eating my words for Christmas dinner. So thank you so much. And thank you, Opportunities Exchange, as always, for bringing together such meaningful conversations with such amazing people like Jamie and Rula.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Yeah.
Thank
It is exciting to see those things happen. And to your point, it is now, it is really the people that need to kind of catch the people and the processes and the departments and the funding streams to catch up to what now, with Bridge Care can be done. Yeah. And maybe some others, but I like to think that we're definitely kind of pushing the bleeding edge of what can be done with technology and integration in the space.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that brings us to the 2:30 magic hour. And so again, we are going to be offering more of these sessions, these opportunities to learn and talk and explore together beginning in January. Kelly Pope, do you have at the top of your head the date of the first one? I know it's on Tuesday from 1 to 2:30. Do you happen to have that?
I want to say that's the 11th of January, but I don't have it.
Right. Second
Yeah.
Tuesday of the month, 1 to 2:30. Please be in touch and let us know if there are topics you really want to know about. We will find people who can speak to those topics, and we will keep the conversation going. And of course, we hope to see a lot of you in Austin, Texas, April 18th, 19th, and 20th for the conference. So think about joining us there. Jamie and Rula, thank you so much for doing this for us today.
Thank you, Rula, so
Yeah.
much too. On the point about people putting politics aside and collaborating. I think Jeffco is a great example of really contributing collaboration to support families and their ecosystem the best they can. So thank you so much for joining, Rula. I appreciate you being here, and thanks for
You bet. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.